My contribution to this year's Taproot Anthology is a story called A Case of Johnny Walker Black. And the title might not mean much to you until you actually read the story, then it becomes clear why it's called that. But the theme of the story is actually something that I think we can all relate to. Do you remember the Peanuts cartoon where Lucy's holding the football, Charlie Brown comes running up to kick it, and just before he kicks it, she pulls it away at the last second, and he flies through the air and slams down onto his back? Well, we've all had things like that happen in our life, right? And every time it happens, we think, no, next time it's going to be different. That won't happen again. Next time it's going to be different. But of course, in the end, she pulls the ball away again, and you crash down again. And I started thinking, how many times is he going to let her do that? That's an interesting question. But even more interesting is, how fast is he going to come back for more punishment? Why would he do that to himself? And you see, the idea is that when we really want something, and you really want something inside, you suddenly become blind to anything that would take that away from you. And you miss all of the red flags, and you miss all of the warning signs that are so obvious to everybody else, because you are laser focused in on what you want. And that's the theme of the story, is what will somebody do when they're laser focused on something? And with that in mind, I ended up creating a character named Brett, and I wrote a scene. And it turned out pretty well. The only unfortunate thing about it was it wasn't the beginning of a story. And in fact, what I had written was the end of a story. So with the end of the story done, I actually had to step back through and find some way to create a beginning of the story and a middle of the story. It was almost like kind of like being on a creek with stepping stones in front, only I was already on the far side. And what I had to do is step back one stone at a time until I finally reached the beginning part. And the beginning is exactly what I want to read for you now. I don't want to give away the ending, so I'm going to read the beginning, and hopefully you will be interested enough that if you pick up a book, you might read the whole story and find out what happens at the end. So here we go with A Case of Johnny Walker Black. Brett often accused his ex-girlfriend of having inverse PMS. Aaron, he claimed, was happy for 3 or 4 days each month, followed by 26 days of nagging, complaining, and unpredictable emotional outbursts. Thinking back, maybe that ratio had been a slight exaggeration, but the bipolar drama was all too real and eventually brought their stormy relationship to an uncomfortable end. And now, as Brett drove down the expressway on a cool Friday evening, he smiled at the memory. Sure, the process of ending it with Aaron had been a nasty affair, punctuated with thrown glassware that stopped just short of criminal violence, but that wasn't what made him smile. Rather, it was knowing that without that breakup, he would have never met Jessica. Jessica was the new light of his life. Petite, naturally blonde, and seriously cute with her custom-fit business suits and conservative librarian glasses, she certainly deserved the lust-at-first-sight attention that Brett gave her the night they were introduced. Yet it was more than that. The conversation was easy and the attraction was electrifying. Their first evening together had been magical, followed immediately by a whirlwind weekend romance that swept him away. Now, barely a week into the relationship, he could not get enough of this bright, passionate, and caring woman. In direct contrast to Aaron, Jessica had the kind of genuine happiness that seemed almost too good to be true, which of course it was. But for now, Brett was blissfully unaware of that fact as he tapped the steering wheel of his Lexus in time with a catchy Fountains of Wayne song. He'd been listening to a lot of light pop music lately, in a sort of dreamy, half-awake state. His cell phone chirped, jerking his thoughts back to the real world, and he glanced at the caller ID and answered. "Mike, dude, what's up? I thought you were going to meet us for a drink after work. We've got half the office here, and there's a waitress who said she'd love to meet a real NASCAR driver." "You told her I was a NASCAR driver?" "Sure, and if she asks, your name is Roberta, and I'm Rico, your crew chief." Brett laughed. "Sounds like fun, Rico, but I'm heading over to Jessica's house." "Jessica? That hot blonde from HR?" "That's the one, but she's more than just hot. She's perfect." And Brett drew out the word perfect to make his point. "Yeah, sure, whatever," Mike said. "But be careful, you know what they say about hot single women." "What?" "No matter how perfect she seems, somewhere there's a guy who's thrilled to be rid of her." Brett laughed again. "I don't know about that. Jess is different." "Uh-huh." There was a long pause, and Brett heard the muffled sound of his friend ordering a beer. "Hey, I gotta go. If you can break away from Miss Perfect, we'll be here until at least 11 o'clock. "All right, sure, later." "And I'm telling you, somebody is thrilled to be rid of her." Brett pressed end and slid the phone back into his pocket, leaving his friend's words hanging. where I'm going to stop it today.